By far we have covered some basics and some important concept about business policy and strategic management, and here we will continue our discussion. So today we will start with a fresh topic, so which is strategic analysis and choice. So what essentially we will do in this is we will try to understand what are the alternatives before us and how do we choose it, right? So this is something that we will try to understand here. Now, as we have done that, we decide the strategy at three levels, and those three levels are at corporate level, SBO level, and functional level. So, at all the three levels, we have the choices, we have the options available with us that which strategy perhaps we would like to go with, and which one do we choose is something that we will try to understand today. And this has a very primary and core statement under it, and which is that organizations like you and I are always in the process of facing alternatives, and many a times, and all the times, in fact not many a times, they have to choose one out of those alternatives, right? Even if you would look at your and I life, we in a daytime also we have so many options and we end up in choosing one. But when we look at it from the strategic angle, this is how we look at it, and this is how we define it. So we call strategic choice as a decision using which we select from the grand strategies which are available to us, and we end up in choosing a strategy which actually best defines our purpose, and which best kind of try to meet our objectives also. So this is something we end up in choosing. While we are doing that, it is important for us to recall what we have done in decision making. I think you can remember what we have done in decision making. 4, 4, 5, 4. So in decision making, the concepts that we have done actually should be in back of our mind while we are doing this, because they will be used somewhere. Because when we are saying strategic choice is a decision, so this is how we are starting the understanding of strategic choice. So decision making we have already done, and that decision making should be in our brain when we are trying to understand it. This is the kind of process which we can talk of, which your book also talks of, which is very simple. It is just in the context of this topic that we do, otherwise the process remains same, even we talk of other perspectives also. So first of all, before we choose, we have to look at the various alternatives available for us, and we focus on them. We analyze these alternatives and we evaluate it, and after evaluation we choose it, right? So very simple thing. If we would look at the process of decision making that we have done, in that also we were talking of this. It is a portion of that, and that portion is only of having the alternatives and choosing the best among them. This is something that we are talking of as a process. Now let us talk of the first step of it, focusing on strategic alternatives. The idea of this step is to have a narrow down approach of a broader phenomenon. Now you can think of expansion as a strategy, you can think of stability as a strategy, you can think of retrenchment as a strategy. So you have so many alternatives. In context of your business, which alternative should be chosen and actually should be considered, not should be chosen, because the choice would come later on. Now here we are only talking of focusing on the strategic alternatives. So the idea here is to narrow down the number of alternatives that you have, because we do not want to go with the maximum number of alternatives which are available with us potentially. We just want to freeze them down to a fewer number, and in the end, out of this fewer number, we actually try to choose one. And that is done using gap analysis. Gap analysis we will spend a lot of time on when we will do marketing of services, the discussion around it. We will talk of the gap in larger detail there also. The gap analysis in a very layman term can be understood as to be the difference between the desired performance and what is your present performance. So this is how we actually look at it. We have already talked about the objectives, we have already talked about the vision, we have already talked about the mission, and in that we were talking about that one of the criteria of setting the mission and vision was objectives, right? And these objectives actually makes us to realize that what should be our desired performance. So in other words, what we are saying is that we have to evaluate our performance keeping our objective as a benchmark. So have we able to achieve it or have we not able to achieve it? So when we are doing that, when we are comparing this, if we are finding that this is what was supposed to be achieved and this is what we have achieved, So this difference can be called as gap, and when you try to analyze this gap, then you say that this is something which is gap analysis. Now this gap analysis helps you in looking at and actually keeping away some of the very common strategies that actually are in your pot when you are beginning the process of strategic analysis choice. Just to try to explain it to you, for example, if the gap analysis says that there is larger gap in terms of, say, your market share that you have fixed yourself for as one of your objective. So this larger gap actually will tell you one thing at least, that you cannot go on with the strategy of stability, because you have to expand, you have to do, you have to experiment something. So at least this expansion is something that you will not consider when you are knowing that the gap is like this. So this gap analysis might help you in understanding that what all we can at the first point can leave and what all we have to consider, so that we can narrow down the list, and out of that list we can actually select. So this gap can be very simply put it in this form also. So this is the desired state, this is the present state, and this is the gap, or we call it a difference, and this is nothing but this is the same. It was only in numbers, it is only in figure. So this is the only difference. So the focusing on the strategy of alternative speaks of your gap analysis primarily. And just to again rerun through the words, which is the bottom line of this point, it is about leaving certain potential alternatives that you have, and to make the list little small, not to go ahead with the entire frame of thoughts, frame of options that you can have. So this is the idea of this step. Now thereafter we can talk of these four strategic alternatives, and we can actually retrench this list, and we can actually shorten down this list. This is what I was telling you also, that expansion, stability, retrenchment, and combination of these is something which you can potentially explain, and this is something that we have already done in decision making and the previous discussions. So will you go with which of these strategy would actually be to some extent addressed by looking at your position of gap analysis. And just to remind you that how we can do that is, we have talked about the perceptual map, we have talked about the market map also, and these maps also can help you in understanding that what is the gap and how much is the gap, right? So this is something that we can start off with the process of our strategic analysis choice. Now expansion, we have been hearing the term in marketing also, we have talked about it. So expansion is about increasing the domain of your business. So expansion might not only necessarily mean to just expand your business, but it means the domain, verticals. So verticals can be like the Tata is in steel also, the Tata is in manufacturing of cars also, the Tata is in manufacturing of the heavy vehicles also. So expansion would not necessarily only mean to expand your current business, but it is also about adding the new verticals and new domains into it. So with that, we have not talked about stability and retrenchment for that. So stability and retrenchment, as the word itself suggests, stability means maintaining the status quo. So which means what position you are in now, just try to maintain it, and the stability would be recommended when you are able to achieve your objectives in a good way, that you just have to continue doing this, maintaining the status quo. Many a times it is misunderstood and misspelt and misaccepted, in the sense that the stability and maintaining the status quo means that no job is to be done. In fact, maintaining your position is a very tedious task, right? In today's environment, when you have the competition so stiff, maintaining your status is going to be a very challenging task, right? So the market is very dynamic, there is a lot of problem, and in that problem, how do you maintain, because you see, you many times you do not have all the things in your hand. Now for example, what has happened with Airtel now, right? So when Idea and Vodafone are coming together, so Airtel was very good. Airtel was the first company in our country which has crossed the marks of subscriber database to be 100 million. So but now Airtel has not done anything wrong, right? But it is because that the two players have come together, and because of that they actually are now a little less in number, and hence they have maintained, they have not been able to maintain the status quo of to be the leading or to be the best or to be the leader into the industry. So this is something that we are trying to understand by maintaining the status quo. It is not an easy task. So stability does not mean doing nothing. It is about doing everything that can maintain your current position, which is always a very difficult task to achieve. Retrenchment is what? Retrenchment is getting rid of your bad businesses, the bad arms, the bad verticals, right? And today we are living in times when the success of one vertical of a company actually motivates the organization to try their hands into the different, verticals also. Now, for example, when we were doing supply chain in productions and operations management, those students who were there we were talking of make and buy decision. So make or buy decisions were what? Because when you are manufacturing anything, you are not into manufacturing of that business only. You are dependent by virtue of your business onto the so many other manufacturers. I remember telling you that the Ford has started manufacturing its this thing music system also. So Ford is no more procuring it; they are manufacturing it. So make or buy. Are you making it or will you buy it? Right? So this is something which has been a very a strategic decision for the companies, and many companies have been able to achieve the cost advantage only because of this make and buy decisions. Now, for example, people say that the Tata has been able to produce the cheapest car in this country because they are actually not dependent upon the outside manufacturers for so many things. Now steel, they are getting it from say Tata Steel, other things also they are getting it from their sister concerns and the related and subsidiary companies. So the make or buy decision is something which is very important to make more sense of business, to be away from the risk of heavy dependence on suppliers. This is also we have done. I hope you would recall when we were talking of product failures. I hope you would recall when we were talking of product recalls, and many of those recalls were actually the onus was given to the suppliers only, right? So when the battery of the Dell laptop was bursting in the middle of a board meeting, now there was a lot of hue and cry, and this hue and cry the Dell has transferred to the supplier who would have supplied this battery to them. When the Samsung Galaxy Note, when it also was facing problem and the brand Samsung was actually at stake, then the Samsung has released it very heavily into the market so that people know that it is not Samsung who is responsible for it, it is the suppliers who are responsible for it, and they have actually banned those suppliers to be supplying more batteries or more those components which has created the problems for them. So it is about make and buy. In this race of making more and more to be less dependent on supplier, though it is not a very handsome decision that a organization can take, but in this race people are actually wanting themselves to be less dependent on the external agencies because they do not have higher control on them. And in the race they have started making a lot of things, and they have started making a lot of things by their own. And in this thing, when they are increasing their domain, you are finding that a lot of companies who have actually ventured into the businesses which were never their core business has actually started facing problem with them. And in the end, what has happened is that they have to go back to their core business, and they have to get away from the added vertical that they were actually experimenting with. And that, when they are trying to do, can be called as retrenchment. So getting rid of a business vertical which is actually eating up the profits of your core business, because you are known for this. And the concept of outsourcing and the concept of the suppliers and the concept and the importance of the buy in respect to make can be understood by this kind of comparison, that you are not meant and to be expert in everything. You have a kind of expertise in one thing, but you cannot be expert in everything. And that is why you see that in marketing also we were talking about that the advertisements, which is such an important, the volume of money of the marketing budget goes to the communication, and this is something that the people are not doing by themselves. They are actually outsourcing it, right? So this is why the people are not expert in everything. They have to give it to other people, and when they are trying their arms and trying their luck into the other verticals of the businesses, they might face the tune, and as a result of that they have to go with the retrenchment as a strategy. So when I was telling you about this gap analysis, now this is the desired state, and this is something that you are currently at. A larger gap, I was telling you that maybe the stability as a strategy is not recommended, and hence we are narrowing down our approach. We may go with say something else. Retrenchment can be one option. It may be because that one vertical of your business is eating up so much of money that you are earning from your core business. So why to have that legacy onto your shoulders? Why are you eating up onto your core businesses? So this is something that the retrenchment can be exercised in these conditions. If you will hover around and if you will look at the current newspapers also, you will find that a lot of people are now trying to save their core businesses and are trying to save their, in fact, subsidiary businesses also, the sister concerns also, by shedding off their loss-making units. Now, for example, Tata Steel is actually in the final stage, or they are actually thinking of selling off their British business, because they are seeing that ultimately the balance sheet is being heavily impacted because of the loss-making business arm of this organization. If you will go back, then Videocon, and if you will look at now, this news is as recent as June 7, 2018, right? So now Videocon, as we have been talking about it, that it has actually tried to revamp itself, right? So it has changed its logo, it has tried to give a new color to it, it has tried to convince the people that now we have changed, now our products are not ages old, we are not legitimate products, but we are modern products. And in the race of making the people believe that they have done a lot of toil and they have invested a lot of money, but still in June they are actually facing such type of problems. And if you will go deep into this news, you will find out that they have around 20,000 crores kind of loan from the banks, which they have been not able to cater to, and they have been very irregular in paying back to the banks, and because of which the RBI has initiated the insolvency action against Videocon, which is a very kind of a serious news for a corporation like Videocon. If you and I want you to read this, and that will tell you that how important this thing has become, that the retrenchment as a strategy is to be considered at times, because if you would do gap analysis of Videocon, what was their objective, what they have thought, and what they are currently at, there is a huge gap, and this huge gap can be attributed to so many companies which have not been able to bring the essence to them, the business essence. Now, for example, look at this line. The sources are telling Times of India that close to dozen companies of Videocon Group has a cumulative debt of around 44,000 crore and are facing similar action. So, dozens of their arms, dozens of their verticals are actually not making sense. So better to get rid of it and to concentrate on to your major operations that you are actually known for. Every company has their flagship products. Every company is known for the flagship services that they might provide, but they are actually getting into the other things also. Now, for example, IITs might be providing PhDs also in management, but IITs are known for your engineering, right? So that is their flagship product. So that engineering is more weighted in comparison to a management degree from an IIT. I'm not saying that it is not good to do a management degree from IIT, but the point is we are trying to understand a concept, and the concept is that you as a university, you as an institution might offer the different courses, but there is something which can be termed as your flagship course, and there can be something which can be termed as your flagship product, and which actually is responsible for most of your profits, and this is something that you are known for. And in the race to expand your business without looking at the concept of consistency, which you've already done, to venture into the new arenas wherein you are not good at, you might face the problem of this, and you might have to attempt the strategic alternative of retrenchment, which is not a very good thing to do. And the news will keep on telling you this. The retrenchment is one of the important things that the people are actually now looking for. SBI is trying to close nine overseas branches of theirs, and the public sector banks collectively will shut down 35 foreign operations. And this is because that these branches are no more considering and contributing to the objectives of SBI the way they have opened them as. So they have more than 190 branches as per this news in 36 countries around the globe, and 9 that they have actually considered to be shutting off, and the retrenchment strategy is being considered. We know that in what condition are we today when we talk of our banking industry. So the retrenchment is an important thing, and this is not only true for the private sector companies, but this is also true for your public sector companies and the entire public government bodies also. I do not know whether you know it or not, that the FCI was also facing the threat of being selling off to the private players, because though it could not be culminated later on, but then the government companies are also not kind of having that coating which actually will safeguard them from the concepts of like retrenchment and all. Now this is something from the government's pocket. Government is planning the sale of 4 loss-making Air India subsidiaries soon, and that includes your AASL, HCI. And just to let you know that what are these things, here is the news, and this is if I can highlight these things. This is your Air India Transport Services, Air India Engineering Services Limited, Air Line Allied Services Limited, and Hotel Corporation of India, which were all the Air India companies. Now they are selling of this. Now it's a big disinvestment that the government is making, but they are doing it step by step. They cannot do it all at the one go. So they are actually doing this retrenchment strategy. So maybe tomorrow, by shedding off these loss-making units, they might think that Air India may be revived, and that can be something, in the future we don't know. But retrenchment is an important strategy, and hence it is to be considered very seriously when you are expanding your business, because expansion and retrenchment are opposite. So expansion is adding the businesses, and retrenchment is shedding off the businesses and the arms. So these are opposite. When you are expanding, it is better to be very careful about what you are doing, because taking back your decisions does not only have a financial negative implication, but it is also symbolically troublesome for us to getting into a position wherein you have to retrench yourself. Okay, now that was about your this strategies, and to be specific, that was about your stability and retrenchment strategies. So this is the 3 options that you have, and these 3 options, when you are actually trying to analyze, then you will further go up into the process of strategic choice. And when you are further going into the process of strategic choice, if you can recall from the first slide, after focusing on the strategic alternatives, now is the time to analyze these strategic alternatives, and hence it is the step number 2 of that process. Now, considering that you are thinking of stability and retrenchment, considering that in the first stage wherein you were focusing onto the strategic alternatives, you have shed off, say, expansion as one of the possible strategies. So now you are only considering stability and retrenchment. Now you will analyze that out of this list of, say, stability and retrenchment, which should I go with? Which is better for me? Should I try to stabilize myself, and should I go for the retrenchment? Right? So these analysis is to be done onto certain factors. The analysis is considered in context of certain factors, and these factors are broadly divided into 2 parts, and these parts are objective and subjective. Now, objectively, we would look at what are the ways by which we can analyze the stability as a strategy and retrenchment as a strategy, and subjectively also we might analyze what could be our methods which can be termed under the head of subjective factors, and using them we can analyze the strategies, the list of strategies that we have. To go ahead, we will choose the strategic alternatives after having analyzed the fewer list of strategies that we have by the objective and subjective factors. Now, what are the subjective and objective factors? After this slide, we will cover what could be the all objective and subjective factors. So in step number 3, we will evaluate the strategic alternatives. In fact, when you are analyzing this, analysis gives you a list. Analysis gives you, in fact, result. And that result is to be implemented. And that is something when you say that you have to evaluate the results of your analysis. And after evaluating that result, you have to choose that which one is going to be the best for you. So this is something which speaks of the process of the strategic analysis and the strategic choice, and following that you end up in saying that whether you will go for stability, or you will go for retrenchment, or you will go for expansion, or you will go for combination of all this, right? So this is kind of a step. Now in this what is important to understand is that how you can analyze the strategies objectively and subjectively. So this is what we were talking about. Now to come back to that, let us first start from the objective criteria of analyzing your strategies. Now we have heard about these terms, we know about these terms, but let us kind of revise it. so that we can understand that how these concepts are coming under the objective tools or objective methods of analyzing a strategy. What is difference between objective and subjective methods? What is the difference between objective and subjective methods? We have been talking about objective and subjective as terms. It is little optimistic to say objectives are subjectives are theoretical in nature. I mean, you can say, but the major line of difference between would be the subjective is you can understand it as to be something which is gut feeling based, which is your thought based. Objective is about numbers. Objective is about the data. Objective is about the facts, right? So this is how we try to look at it. So now these are the methods which can be considered or which should be considered under the objective criteria of strategic analysis. And these are the terms which you have heard, and this is something that we will touch upon them again. So we start with SWOT analysis, we start with corporate portfolio analysis, experience curve analysis, life cycle analysis, industry analysis, and competitor analysis. So this is something that we will do. And it is said and it is argued that once you do all these things, or if you do say 3 to 4 things out of the list which is given here, that will give you a very good idea that which strategy should you go with. The SWOT will tell you a lot about yourself. The corporate portfolio analysis will tell you a lot. Combining the result of all these analyses, you might say that no, expansion is not the choice, no, stability should not be the choice, and no, the retrenchment should not be the choice. So depending upon that, you end up in deciding. So let us pick them one by one. Let us start with SWOT. We will not spend much time on it because we have already covered SWOT analysis. And when we were doing SWOT analysis, I think you can recall, you can remember when we were doing organizational appraisal, right? And when we were doing environment appraisal also. So in environmental organization appraisal, we were trying to understand the inside and out of the company. And inside of the company actually deals with your strength and weaknesses, and outside of the company deals with your opportunity and threats. And the fact that we have not only talked about it, and in fact we have actually talked about it in detail, I'm assuming that we understood what is the SWOT analysis and we need to spend much of the time on it. Considering that, let us very politely look at this as a concept. It is basically the appraisal of your company from inside and outside both. So when you are understanding strength and weaknesses, it is the inside analysis. When you are talking of opportunities and threats, you are talking of external analysis and external evaluation of the company. And when you do this, you understand where you are standing, and that can actually help you in taking the decision whether you should go with stability or you should go with retrenchment, the two options that we are considering here. Corporate portfolio analysis, there are a lot of techniques which people talk of it here, and you can recall the perceptual mapping, the positional mapping. The concept of perceptual mapping can be used in understanding where you are standing and how are your businesses doing, and which part of it is actually in bad condition and which part of it is in good condition, and where you are standing if you are talking of only one business per unit. And this is something which can be called as corporate portfolio analysis. And if you have to define it, you can understand it like that: those techniques which can help strategists in taking strategic decisions with regard to individual products or businesses. And that is something which can be called as your corporate portfolio analysis. One of the popular technique which has come across and which is also accepted by the book writers and the literature both is GE 9-cell matrix. Right? GE has talked about this matrix, which basically, because the name itself suggests that it is GE 9-cell matrix. So there are 9 cells into it, and these 9 cells speaks of the condition of your business, the condition of your product, the condition of your service, the condition of your vertical, and you can put any organization in one out of these 9 cells. And these 9 cells actually are not random choices for your company, but these 9 cells are chosen depending upon certain parameters, the evaluation of certain parameters in respect to the company which is being placed in one out of these 9 cells. That these are 9 cells and all the 9 cells are given a name, right? And these names tells you that if you are in this cell, what is the condition of your organization. And this 9 cell speaks of the being a leader, being in the growth stage, being in a stage wherein you have to try harder, and a stage wherein you have to proceed with care, the cash generation stage you might be in, or you have to consider yourself to be in a situation wherein either you improve or you quit. Phased withdrawal, which is retrenchment, the phased withdrawal come also here, and total withdrawal, so which means there is no scope for your business to survive. Now you can see that the matrix is given 3 colors, right? So one is green color and one is yellow and one is red. So these colors also has a meaning. The green color says that you are in a kind of situation where you can think of expansion as a strategy. So this is what this says. So suppose if you would look at this thing, then you will find that on the vertical axis of it, it is industry attractiveness, right? So industry attractiveness is a parameter which the GE 9-cell matrix uses. Now, how do you define industry attractiveness? It is basically the evaluation of the industry on certain parameters. Now, the question arises, what is an industry? Industry is basically the group of the players who are into the same business, or who are actually catering to the similar need and to the substitute products. So, if an industry can be analyzed on these parameters, what is the market size and growth rate? What is industry profit margin? What is competitive intensity? What is seasonality? What is cyclicality? What is economies of scale, technology, social and legal environment? All these things combinedly speaks of the industry as a whole, right? Industry as a whole means, is it growing? Now we say that aviation industry is going through a bad phase. You might have heard this term. We say that the tobacco industry is going through a bad phase. Now why are we saying this? Is because maybe that the industry is facing a very slow growth rate. The profit margins has decreased to a high low, and this actually is making you to believe that the industry is in very bad shape. So this is something which speaks of the industry attractiveness. On all these things, you evaluate the industry and then you speak of whether this industry can be considered as to be low, medium or high in industry attractiveness, right? So analyzing all these components will give you an idea about the vertical axis of this GE 9-cell matrix. So this is either high, medium or low. So if you are scoring low on these things for industry, it might be low or medium or high. Then onto the x-axis of it, it is enterprise strength. So enterprise strength is defined by all these things. Now this enterprise strength speaks of the organization, right? So you as an organization, or your business as an organization, or your vertical as an organization. Now if you can speak of your relative market share in comparison to your competition, if you can speak of profit margins, what you are able to achieve, if you are able to compete on price and quality, knowledge of customer, and all those things which are very easy to understand, you actually will have an idea about your enterprise strength. Now knowing these two things, you just put it in this matrix where you are standing, and that will give you an idea of whether you should go with expansion. So I was telling you that the colors also speak something. So the green color, if you are finding yourself in the 3 cells which are highlighted with green color, it tells you that you can go with expansion in the strategy. Expansion can be one of the potential options. If you are in red, then you can think of retrenchment. You should think of retrenchment. In fact, there is one thing, which is when your enterprise strength is also low and when the industry attractiveness is also low, so there is no point in continuing, into this industry. So that simply means that there is no demand of this product. People are not willing to purchase it. Yes, honey, you are saying something. Okay. So which means what? Which means that you have to, actually what this matrix is doing, this matrix is placing an organization in comparison to how industry is doing. So if industry is doing good, you are not doing good, so there is a problem. If industry is not doing good, then you are not doing good, that is still okay. right? So when you are looking at Indigo as a player in aviation industry, there was a time when everyone was facing a lot of problems, and Indigo in the times of 2008 and 9 was actually giving order of 100 new Boeings. So when everyone is actually, everything is actually following the measures by which they can save some money, and then you are expanding your business like the 100 aircrafts are ordered. Now this is a big decision, which means they are able to make profit out of it. That means industry is not down, because if one player is making profits, so which means you can also make. So SpiceJet has no excuse that I am not doing good, because someone else is doing good in the same industry with the same type of offering by catering to similar type of consumers. It is not that they are actually catering to the separate segment of the consumer. The segment is going to be same, because both are the low cost carriers. So huh? So you have to, that is what you have to understand, that why he or she is doing good, why I am not doing good. And that is precisely this metric speaks of. It is actually placing you, see how is industry attractiveness measured. Now you look at it, the industry profit margin. If Indigo is drawing so much of profit out of this industry that they are able to order 100 new aircrafts, so which means the profit margin is there in the industry. That is why they are surviving. So the question is, that why you are not able to do that? And the answer of this question can be complex and can be multifaceted also, because many a times it so happens that there is no difference between in my mind about Indigo or Spice, but because the people are using Indigo only, because ek hawa chali hui hai, so I will go with Indigo only. So there might not be very clear cut difference in that, but still the perception has to be managed, and that is what we talk in consumer behavior also, right? So this is your GE 9 cell matrix. Yes, Neeraj. How they are different? See, the withdrawal is something which is written into the this side, so you cannot see it. Withdrawal means getting out, and quitting. You see what is written. What is written? You have to read. You have to read it. Improve or quit. Improve or quit means either you do something or you will be out. This is what the meaning of this thing is. Do or die. So it means not that they are dying. It means if you do not do something here, you will be in trouble. It is not about quitting. Quitting means that you are no more in a position to sustain your position, right? So that is what I was telling you. The green, the colors are also speaking it. So the yellow speaks of stability. So if you are in this type of position, you better sustain yourself at this position, and you will survive. So if you because this is the cell wherein the industry is having lot of potential, but you are not been able to exploit that potential. So means if you continue doing that, it is not about that you quit, it is about that you will be out, right? Either you improve or you will be out. So this is what this is actually trying to explain. So withdrawal is like kind of wherein you are taking a decision, I am doing it. Quit is a forced thing, right? So you do not do it, the market will throw you out. This is quitting. And withdrawal is when you are taking a strategic decision. So Air India, the SBI are not withdrawing their businesses, but they are thoughtfully taking this decision that I have to get out of these places, and which can actually make some more sense to me, right? So this is how you have to look at these two things. Okay. Now this is the GE 9 cell matrix. It is about comparing your organization with the industry and how the industry is doing. Now continuing it further, the technique number 2, which we talked under the objective criteria, is experience curve analysis. I don't think that it will and it should require a degree of philosophy to understand that the more you are into something, the more refined you become. And this is your experience curve, right? The companies who are in business for long, who understand the business, have this aspect behind them because they are experienced. If any company is able to offer a service at a cost, tomorrow you might not say that I am going to come in this business and I will be offering the product at this cost. One of your it is because that they are in volumes and they are having this experience. Just to make this thing more clear to you, now this is the experience curve analysis of Ford Model T. We have talked about this car, the first mass car on this planet, which the Ford has presented to the people of the world. Now, when in 1906 the project was started, the 1909 the model was out. You see that how when the time is passing by and how when you are producing more, the economies of scales is achieved and your cost is actually coming down, and the slope is as high as 77%. Right? So this is how you have to understand that the one who is in the business since so long, that experience is something that is making him to achieve the economies of scale, which perhaps you and I cannot. Yes, the examples that we have discussed are relating to more of the volume, but the experience also has its role. If they would also be generating the products in the same numbers that you are doing, at that time also they might be able to produce it and procure it at the level or at the cost that you and I may not be able to do it. So this is something experience curve analysis. Dell, his question is कि Dell जो है उसने शुरू में कुछ किया, they were not experienced, but still they have been able to achieve their objective that they were actually thinking of. देखिए कुछ चीज़ें ऐसी होती हैं जहाँ पर आपका इंडस्ट्री का पैटर्न ही चेंज हो रहा होता है. जब हम डेल की बात करें, द वे आई विल रिस्पॉन्ड टू दिस क्वेश्चन इज बिकॉज व्हेन डेल वाज एक्चुअली कमिंग इनटू द बिजनेस, दे वर और दे टुडे आल्सो दे आर कंसीडर्ड एज पायनियर्स ऑफ डायरेक्ट मार्केटिंग, right? So how many players were there who were actually doing direct marketing at the scale that the Dell has started at that time? Even today people are, now people have started doing the direct marketing. Now even the high known products are also catered to by the concept of direct marketing, but in those times they have done it. There is something which is called as first mover advantage, and first mover advantage is in the context of this course only, right? When we were doing new product development, then also we talked about it. So when a player will come for the first time in the market for something which is new, he is going to flesh out the cream of the market, right? So but this can backfire also. This is a risk also that you are actually going on with. So when the Dell is called pioneer, that means they were doing it for the first time at that scale, and they have done it at that scale, so people have liked it, the idea worked out. Now we are talking of a mature market, right? So if tomorrow you start producing the cola products and you then say that I will fight with Pepsi and Coke in the way they are doing the business. Now you tomorrow say that I'll be actually innovating a new way of doing business, a new dimension, a new model of business, then you might work out. But if you say that their way of doing business I will also do and I will compete with them, that is something that we are talking about. Now let us bring up the discussion of that fog also, the Vinny Cosmetics also. There is this mature market, and the people might argue that in this mature market they have been able to get the things out of it. Now this is something which is called a breaking the clutter, the creativity, the other ways of doing business, the different and innovative ways of reaching to consumers. When you are talking of this, now this is also considered as one of the business strategy and business essence, right? But here what we are talking of is that when you are considering the market as to be a matured one, someone who is experienced, who is having experience of say 50 years or 60 years or maybe say a century, and then following that traditional path, you are saying I will fight with them, that is going to be troublesome. So this is how we actually should be looking at it, right? Okay, so this is your experience curve. Now is life cycle analysis. Now this is, we know it, we have done it in product life cycle, and here we are calling it as life cycle. We know that like you and I, products and businesses also takes birth and they die, right? So no one is for forever. So when they are taking birth, what is it that they are giving back to the organization, and when they are dying, what is it that they are giving back to the organization, right? So the death can be in multiple domains, can be by multiple methods, can be by various reasons. For example, a company might think of retrenchment, and hence this is the death of a company. So there can be a number of ways. But analyzing your life cycle also gives you a first-hand information about where your organization is standing, and in this case, where and what strategy should be better for you. Now, if you will look at, now one more thing, let me be very clear of what I am not saying. What is depicted here is a general representation of how a business would see the life of their products. But there can be deviations, and there are deviations. The specific products may be experiencing a very different life cycle than this, but it is kind of an average. It is kind of an implication that you will find that on an average it can be said that the products would be going through this phase. So this is there are two colors, the sales revenues and the profit. You can see the pink color represents the sales, and the blue color represents profit. So when sales are starting going up at the introduction stage of the product, then the profits are in negative. So obviously you are only investing and you're not getting something back. Your product should start seeing the growth stage within a stipulated period of time, which means you should start getting profits at a reasonable margin when your product has passed that much of time into the market as per your business plan. That is something which is represented here. If you or your product has not been able to do that, so that means there is a problem, and that is how you would look at whether which strategy can you go for and how you should actually be thinking about it. And now is the time when you have to revisit your strategy, and in the times to come the same plan that you are working now on might not be making sense, right? So this is how the life cycle analysis, it is about again finding the gap, that generally the product would start seeing the profits after so much of time, but your is not able to achieve it, and hence there is a problem that needs to be revisited. So this is how the life cycle can be used to understand it. Then we talk of industry analysis. I hope you would have heard about Michael E. Porter. You have done his model, Porter 5 forces model. The same thing is here, right? You've done it in which course? International business. So the same model actually can be used in understanding the organization's current state, and that current state can be analyzed by this. It is kind of a competition analysis that you might follow. So you know about Porter. He have talked about the bargaining power of suppliers, the threat of substitute products, the bargaining power of buyers, and threat of new entrants. All those things can be understood by considering your product in the center, and then you come to know that this is what the current market is about, and where you will survive in such a market, in such competition, where the bargaining powers of suppliers is too high. How will you make sense of your business? So that also gives you some idea. So as I was telling you that the business policy and strategic management is a subject which actually draws the learning of all the subjects of management. So the Michael E. Porter model or even the other models also can be considered while you are trying to analyze the current state of your organization and the current state of your business model. And that can be used to understand and to evaluate and to process and to calibrate that which strategy should rather be adopted and should rather be selected. So in competition analysis, you can also learn about your competition, and we will not be spending time on it. So I don't know strategies that they were actually engaged in at that time, how they have evolved, how they are actually reaching to the stage where they are now. So these all things are paving a path for you, and actually they are playing a very important role in understanding the market and deciding the future way for your organization. Many of you, when you will join your companies, maybe it should not be taken as a surprise that your boss might give you this assignment of doing the competition analysis. I remember when I joined this company, this is the mail which I have got from my brand manager, Chandana Rakshit. So you can read it. That is in January 22, 2009. She wrote to me and Atul Verma. We both were there. Guys, here is a project to be handled by both of you. Hopefully Sam and Shans will be sending creatives and competitive media reviews. This is what you need to compile additionally. Company ownership, business model, other commercial interest of the company. This is for competition. Geographic coverage, international alliances, product portfolio, strategy to develop business, consumer marketing, trade, etc. Future projections of growth. I have attached a very old presentation of ITZ cards and a recent comparison sheet just at food for thought. Go for it. Deadline is 28th January 2009, 16:30 hours, and we are sitting at 22nd of January. So please go over the list of players you will be tracking with me before that, ideally tomorrow. So the first one of those assignments that you go, because we were in the process of coming up with this product, and hence understanding the competition is the first stage of it. And when you do not do that, you are not in a position to fight your competition. And here you see it is a very complex exercise, in fact. I mean, to understand the ownership of a company, maybe you might find it on its website by looking at the legacy of the company. Business model understanding is not that an easy task. What is the model? I mean, generally we say that yes, they are working on advertising, they are working on this, they are working on fees, they are working on rent. So that can be termed as a business model, but it actually requires a lot of things. Other commercial interests of the company, the geographic coverage, international alliances, product portfolio, strategy to develop business. The point number 7 is, important one. This is what we are doing now also. So what I'm trying to tell you is that the competition analysis is an important aspect of any business. Before you start anything, if you do not read about your competition, you will never come to know how your market is doing, and what scope do you have as far as the 4Ps are concerned, what price bracket that you can work within, what product or what type of product you can actually come up with, what communication strategy, because it is going to be a pure failure if the competition is just spending 20 rupees on communication, and because you are coming with a new product and you are giving a budget of 100 rupees to it, because you will eat up in your profits. It is good that you should let the consumers know to understand that you are there with this product, but then let us not kill the, because there are some decisions which impacts not only you but the industry as a whole, right? So that is how the competition analysis becomes important. And this is a working sheet that we were working on. I cannot find the full file which we could have gone with, but these were the players that this is what I can only find. So this is the competition analysis, and then this Excel sheet was used to produce that map, perceptual map, and the business map, and the corporate portfolio, whatever you may call it, that this is where this company is standing, this is where this company is standing, and this is how they are doing it. So all that was prepared in a PowerPoint presentation, was presented to our band manager. So what we are trying to understand is that competition analysis is an important step, right? So I mean, commenting on future projections is not an easy task. Commenting on strategy is not an easy task. Product portfolio still you can find, and all those things we have already discussed, right? So competition analysis is an important thing that you have to actually consider. And if you do not consider, then it goes back. And why I presented this to you is because I know that you have already looked at it, but just to give you an idea, that Excel sheet, when it was compiled fully, was used to create a competitive mapping also. And considering the concept of the perceptual mapping, the competitive mapping was prepared, and hence all the players were actually mapped onto the certain characteristics on which the industry works. To be specific, we were into the online payment gateways, and online payment gateway as an industry works on what? Depending upon that, the mapping and the positioning and the placement of the various competitors can be made, right? Okay, so this was your objective criteria of analyzing the strategy. Now we have talked about the objective criteria. Now we will go on to the subjective criteria. So in objective criteria, we have touched upon SWOT, we have touched upon competition analysis, we have touched upon GE 9-cell matrix, right? So all those things we have talked about, and now we will talk of the subjective criteria of strategic analysis, right? Subjective criteria is basically, as I was telling you, it is about taking a decision by an individual or by maybe a group of people, depending upon some data that they are having, or depending upon the previous documents that they might be having access to. So meaning thereby, you might look at the government policies, you might look at CSFs. What is CSFs? We have done it. Critical success factors. And what is distinctive competencies? Exclusively. If you will remember the organizational appraisal that we have done, in that we have very categorically talked about what is competency and what is distinctive competency. And we have also talked about what is capability, right? So these are terms which end up in confusing the brains and confusing the thoughts of the consumer or of the marketer or of the students or of the teacher also. So that is why it is important to recall that slide wherein that structure was presented, in which it was told that how the two things combines and forms the strengths and weaknesses, and how these strengths and weaknesses combines to create the synergy, and how this synergy is used to create the capability, and how the capability is used to create the competency, and how the competency is different from distinctive competency, and how it leads to the strategic advantage. So that structure is to be kept in your mind. So the understanding of CSFs is important to understand that where you are now, what are the critical success factors. Needless to say, the critical success factors need not only be to looked at from one point of view. When we were doing productions and operations, I told you and we discussed that the critical success factors are not only of industry, but this is of country also, this is of places also, regionally also you might talk of critical success factors. And distinctive competency, we have just concluded when we were doing organizational appraisal. Decision style and attitude to risk. Decision style, hopefully you will remember we have already talked about decision making, and that is the reason when we were starting the discussion today, I told you that it is important for us to recall our discussion on decision making. And because the subjective decisions are made depending upon so many things, and decision making we were talking of program decisions and non-program decisions. So the strategic point of view of looking at this decision style would rather be related to the non-program decisions but not the program decisions. Attitude to risk, that also is an individualistic phenomenon. So Philip Knight might have taken the risk of signing Michael Jordan. So that is the attitude towards the risk. Yes, I am ready to take the risk, and if I am taking the risk, then I will also reap the fruits. The people who play safe are not the people who reach at the top. They are like the safe belly people, and they are just into that segment of yellow segment wherein stability, the maintaining the status quo, just picking up those things which other ones are also picking, so they do not look for anything new. Internal political considerations, that also we have done while we were doing external environment, while we were doing organizational appraisals. The behavioral environment, if you can remember, we have done it in internal analysis. So that behavioral environment actually speaks of the internal political considerations also. So this is something that we consider as to be the subjective criteria of strategic analysis. Now combining this objective and strategy, so ideally the theoretically the bookish perspective of this would be to go with each and every point before deciding that where in that 9-cell matrix you can be placed. But the people do not go with everything. They would only, so many people, the most traditional and the most common practice of establishing your place into the competition is just to look at the SWOT. And understanding the SWOT, you will say this is where I am standing. But the ideal perspective would be to look at each and everything, and then you are understanding where are you now, and that understanding will help you in deciding, because the next step was evaluation of the strategy. So this is we are doing under step number 2, which is the strategic analysis. The step number 3 was evaluation of these strategies, and step number 4 was implementation or the selection. So this is where we are just trying to understand that the fewer lists that we have been able to procure as the result of step number 1, which is focusing on our strategic analysis, strategic choice, which one out of these selected few strategies should we go with. So this is something which can be achieved by looking at the objective and subjective criteria combined.